Folks, it's been about a year now since we started with the Ultimate Universe. It started really in July with Ultimate Invasion, and then really kicked off for most people with Ultimate Spider-Man last time December. It's now December 7th of 2024, and a full year has passed. What is the Ultimate Universe doing? There's something in the water because the hype's still real, the stories are still getting a lot of critical success and financial success, and it really feels like we're in a new era of comics because of it. And it's DC contemporary, but that's a different story for a different time. But with a year passing, I feel like it's now the perfect time to really start to talk about the pros and cons of this new universe, what makes it really click with a lot of people, and where it's kind of struggling. Now, this is all going to be very subjective, this is all my opinion, and a little bit of conversation about what I'm seeing. But let's be real, what I'm seeing isn't the full picture. There's a lot of people I do and don't talk to. I try to be objective in my criticism, however, there's always going to be a bias and subjectiveness involved in everything we say. It's literally impossible to do an objective anything without just saying, here's what happened, ... So, at the end of the day, whatever I say here does not change your opinion. No other opinion matters but yours. If you like something, great, it's good. If you don't like something, it's bad, it's terrible. Who cares? It's all subjective. Who cares what I say? I'm just a dude on YouTube with a cool flannel and a cool button that says I read banned books. That's not even I'm not even getting paid to say that. I like books, and we shouldn't ban them. And I got this button at New York Comic Con and I wanted to wear it. So all that to say, there's no bad opinions here. Speaking of bad, I'm kidding. So this is more of a review / retrospective, so I'm not going to do a very in-depth critical history of the Ultimate Universe that is now and was, but we'll do a quick snapshot of what went down to get us to this point exactly. So back in the early 2000s, there was this Ultimate Universe that went by 1610. It was an attempt to retell old stories in a modern lens. It reshaped characters, it reshaped the world, and it was really affected by a little thing we like to call 9/11. And surprisingly, Tom King isn't on any of these books. The original Ultimate Universe is controversial, to say the least. A lot of people love its Ultimate Spider-Man, but other books are really up to debate whether or not they liked it or not. Ultimates was written by Mark Millar, and it was a book that tried to do a criticism of the American complex system and imperialism through the military, at the same time while kind of saying it's inevitable and needs to happen. It was really conflicting messages happening in Ultimates 1 and 2, and then Ultimates 3 by Jeff Loeb, sucked. I mean, it was so bad that he wrote a scene where Wolverine, who is the somehow father of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver in this universe, he watches them have sex. A father watches incest of his own kids in this universe. That's the kind of level of creativity we're talking about here. It's just edginess for the sake of edginess at times. But there's also a lot of diamonds in the rough. Ultimate X-Men gets another lot of flack, and well deserved. Again, mostly due to Mark Millar, but then there's a lot of touching stories in there. One of my favorite X-Men stories is in that run. And then one of my favorite events is in Ultimate Universe. Ultimate Doomsday, I think, is just fun, smart, and really just exciting and surprising. And then there's a relaunch where it became Ultimate Comics, and it was really trying to survive after the disastrous event Ultimatum, but it ultimately was a failure. Yes, critically it was doing a lot better, but financially it wasn't there. The Ultimate books stretched themselves way too thin. Meanwhile, 616 was modernizing, so that the difference between the two is really just the edginess, but they were both trying to take these bigger legacy approaches at the time. So the Ultimate Universe became redundant and financially unsustainable, and that was about 10 years ago. Now there was 2 attempts to kind of bring back the Ultimate Universe. One was under Brian Michael Bendis, where during his Spider-Man run that starred Peter Parker and Miles Morales, he introduced that the Ultimate Universe is still alive and still going. Nothing came of that. Then again, Donny Cates tried this during his Venom run, where he had the Maker, the original Reed Richards who turned evil from that universe, long story, return to his universe to find it in disarray and perfect for taking over. Fun fact, we never saw that either. What happened behind the scenes? No one knows. What I could tell you is that Jonathan Hickman, when he was going to start his Ultimate Universe, said, I do not care about any of that. Ultimate Invasion kicks off the Ultimate Universe by introducing the Maker to new readers, again, the evil Reed Richards of the original Ultimate Universe, and he decides, hey, I'm gonna go and find a universe that I could corrupt and make my own. I love the Maker. I think he's a fantastic, fun villain. I think he's swarmy, I think he's kind of charming, I think he's cruel, and I think he's just fun. He's everything I kind of want from villainy, where it's there's no more empathy to be had there. You see the bones of who used to be a human, but now it's just overtaken with cruelty. I think that's a really cool concept to explore, and Jonathan Hickman is the best at doing it. So long story short, in Ultimate Invasion, the Maker is successful in finding a universe that is dubbed 6160, and he takes it over and makes it his own. The Age of Hero never comes. Right at the inception of the Age of Heroes, the Maker enters and foils every spider bite, every ice soldier getting thawed out, and every, hey, yo, what the, can I show that? Am I allowed to show this? I feel like, am I gonna get in trouble? At the end of Ultimate Invasion, the Maker gets locked away in this futuristic city. Imagine kind of like how in Dragon Ball Z, they go to like this time capsule that traps them in there, and they like live a whole year in a day or an hour or whatever. It's the same concept, but in our time, he's stuck in there for a year, and in his time, he's stuck in there for thousands of years. So now there's a ticking time clock that's going on in Ultimate Universe where the Maker will one day return, and who knows what kind of marvelous evolution he could go through in 1,000 years. You have someone with the intellect of Reed Richards stuck in a time capsule where he has 1,000 years to plot his revenge. And also, he's evil. He kills children. So the stakes are pretty low. A new Ultimates is forming, which is basically their universe's version of Avengers. The team includes all of our favorites, like a young Tony Stark, Captain America, Thor, Lady Sif, Giant Man, Wasp, and a Reed Richards that's actually Dr. Doom, but is actually Reed Richards after he was tortured by the other Reed Richards from a different universe. That's not our universe or their universe, but a different universe entirely. But did I mention this is new reader friendly? So in this first phase, there's 4 Ultimate books. X-Men, Black Panther, Spider-Man, and Ultimates. I don't want to spoil all my thoughts, but I'm very conflicted about this universe, and I want to discuss why. To keep things nice and clean, we'll talk about each one at a time, ending with Ultimate Spider-Man because that's everyone's favorite. 4 books, 1 year, what could have possibly happened? Let's talk about it. First, we're starting with Brian Edward Hill's and Stefano Caselli's Black Panther. The best way to describe this book is that imagine if Black Panther was trying to be Dune, but a little less successfully. The main premises of this book is Wakanda going to war against the upper and lower kingdoms of Africa, which are ruled by Ra and Khonshu. That's right, it's Black Panther versus Moon Knight in this Ultimate Universe, and it's pretty fun. I think the problem I have with it is that 1, the first volume is very slow. If you're familiar with any Black Panther story or origin ever, including just the movie, you kind of know what you're getting into in terms of his origin. King T'Chaka is killed and T'Challa takes over, and he does Black Panther stuff. The Dune analogy is very clear, and this isn't just like me pulling this out of nowhere. First of all, they say they're doing a holy war at one point in this comic, so there's that. And also, Brian Edward Hill, the author, directly said that this is inspired by Dune. Now, a lot of books have been inspired by Dune, but I gotta say, I think this one was too inspired by Dune. I think all the new mythology that they're putting into Wakanda is really interesting, and again, very Dune inspired, but I kind of wish that it would take its time to try something a little bit new. Sure, there's no like spice in there, but it is a war of resources, and I kind of wish it was a little bit deeper than that. There is some new aspects being introduced, like for instance, vibranium has a polar opposite in the same that life has a polar opposite in death. I think that's a very interesting concept, and I think the character work is really what's driving me to be included and feel connected to this war. I think my big problem with it is that it just doesn't feel unique enough. Sure, Moon Knight's a new concept, being a villain and everything, but I feel like we really could have done something really unique with how we present ourselves with Wakanda, with the idea of the Black Panther. We might be getting to something unique. I think with the introduction of the Sorcerer Supreme, that could really mix things up, and I think that's a really fun character. And to be fair, I think all the characters are really fun and very interesting and feel very different and unique. Brian Edward Hill is a very good writer. I really like him, and I don't think this is a bad book at all. I think none of these books are bad, but it's just not unique enough for what I'm looking for in Ultimate Universe. Again, yes, a new nation to go to war with, but Wakanda's always going to war with a different nation, whether it's Atlantis or Latveria, home of Dr. Doom. It seems like that's the only story we ever really get. It's about resource management, and I think there's something interesting to be said there in a new universe, but I'm not sure we're saying that just yet. I'm really excited to see where it goes. I liked reading it in trade better than I liked reading it in individual issues. The pacing is very slow in the first volume, and it's kind of on purpose and also necessary, and it really kicks up more in the second volume, because by the second volume, T'Challa is actually invested in this war now and actually has a purpose, and the stakes are really established. But in the first one, it's like this mystery of like, why is Ra and Khonshu like at war now with Wakanda, and why do we care, and also what do we not know about vibranium? There's something going on, and that mystery is like kind of interesting, but not too much. But now that we see the real stakes of the story, I feel it more in the story's writing, and it feels like we're actually moving towards something. And again, with that established ticking time clock, it's felt a little bit more in the second volume than the first volume, where in the first volume it feels like, oh, we're skipping a month ahead. That's something I didn't mention. All of these books happen in real time. So they come out monthly, so that means every single month you're reading a new month story. This isn't like a traditional comic where you just pick up where it was left off or maybe skip a few days or a week at most. Every single month, we're picking up a month later. So that means these characters are doing who knows what between that. And this is a criticism I have for pretty much all the books, that I wish this wasn't the case. I think I want to go into this a little bit more later, but just keep that in mind for now. So overall, if you've read a Black Panther book before, this is another Black Panther book, that's not a problem. But if you're looking for something unique or new, you're not going to get that exactly here, but it feels a little fresh at least. Again, I still recommend all these books, but I just wish there was a little bit more uniqueness, and I'm hoping to see more of that come up with the introduction of Sorcerer Supreme. Next up is Ultimate X-Men by Peach Momoko with translations by Zach Davison. This is one that I wasn't really enjoying when I was reading it month to month, but again, the trade made it a little bit better. This version of X-Men takes place in Japan and follows our protagonist Hisako Ichichi, who you might know from 616 as Armor. I really like this book. I think it's very unique, and it's exactly what I was looking for when I hear, oh, we're going to a new universe where the rules are different. This isn't your traditional X-Men, this isn't your traditional rules for mutants, it's all unique and different. There's a lot of mystery still revolving around what a mutant is in this universe, and we get little tidbits in this book and what the kind of relationship they have with the rest of society. There's an introduction of a cult called Children of the Atom that is, well, I guess a church is what they call themselves, but let's be real. There's also this element of horror to it. It's like a spooky, Junji Ito inspired, clearly, comic that could fit easily into the manga section. But it's not just that, the art is also very unique. Where the other books kind of go for this traditional comic book look, this goes very left field in a very fresh and fun way. Now there's two reasons for this. The first reason is Peach Momoko's style is just very Japanese inspired because she's Japanese and from Japan. But on top of that, I think she's also not used to the monthly grind. She has miniseries before where she did the art and the story before, but I think with miniseries there's a little bit more prep time you get to do. And when you go to ongoing, it's kind of harder to prep a long form story like that. And that kind of pressure, I think you see a little bit in her art. Her art isn't bad at all. It's great, it's fantastic, but it's unique from what she normally does. It looks very similar, but you can see there's a lot more quickness, and I don't want to say rush, but just quickness in her new styling. It feels like a new type of efficiency is happening in her art that makes it feel unique and a mixture of cartoony, Japanesey, and Americani. Can I say any of those words? Her art feels really spooky at times, and other times really funny. It feels very just, I keep saying the word, but fresh is the only word I could think of. And it turns off a lot of people from this comic, but I think it's fun and it's able to balance this lightness and darkness that the story goes for. There's a lot of light moments in this story, followed by very dark moments. I'm excited to see where this one goes. I think the month-to-month aspect of it, again, doesn't really happen that well. It's almost ignored in this book. Like, you could be mistaken and just think, oh yeah, this whole semester happens in 2 weeks, because that's what the story feels like it's doing. It barely mentions that a month is going by, except for in like small things like, oh, we're doing this festival now, even though we did a different seasonal festival like 2 episodes ago. I think another way this book really stands out is in its cultural standpoint. I think again, because Peach Momoko is Japanese, living in Japan, and the story takes place in Japan, we get to see a little bit more of a different side of not just Ultimate Universe, but comics than we get to normally see in Western media, to the point that she even has a page at the end of each issue where she talks about some of the lexicon that is popular in Japan or culturally important to Japan that we just wouldn't get in America. I love that comics can take us to new places, and this is the one where I really feel like I'm in a fresh new environment and learning something in a fun way. Next is Ultimates by Dennis Camp and Juan Frigeri. And folks, this is my favorite book at Marvel right now. I love this book. I think it's an almost perfect book. I do have some complaints because I'm a critical person, unfortunately. However, this book hits exactly what I was looking for in this new Ultimate Universe. The thing that this book and Ultimate X-Men do that the other 2 books don't really do that well is that they come in and say, you think you know these characters, but you really do not. Let me reintroduce you to who these people are. And what I mean by that is that there is this meta context that is coming in when we go into these stories. We are coming in saying, I know this is an Elseworld story, I know the 616 versions, even if it's just partly or in passing or from the movies, I know who these characters are supposed to be. And all the books play with that in different ways. But I think Ultimates and Ultimate X-Men is the only one that really says, Okay, yeah, but you don't know who these characters are for real. I really recommend you read Ultimate Invasion and Ultimate Universe #1 before reading Ultimates because it all ties together very nicely. I don't think it's totally necessary, but it helps you understand not only the stakes, but also the scope and who these characters are and why they're starting this way. Tony Stark is a genius, but he's not the original inventor of Iron Man in this universe. That goes to Obadiah Stane and Howard Stark. Howard Stark in Ultimate Invasion gets trapped in the city with the Maker, and so it's up to Tony Stark to kind of take over this role of being like, alright, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, who's going to step up, we'll do it. But at the same time, the Ultimates get blamed for a terrorist attack they didn't do, so the public perception's against them, and the powers that be do not want them to rise up or inspire anybody. So they're trying to frame them as these terrorists instead of freedom fighters. And Dennis Camp does not shy away from this hard reality. Each issue is like a different snapshot focus, usually on a different character. The first issue is about the introduction of Giant Man and the Wasp. The next issue is about Captain America. We get an issue focused on this universe's doom, which is actually Reed Richards. And we get introduced to a new Hawkeye that's non-binary Native American. And we get introduced to a new Pacific Islander version of She-Hulk. And I just love the way this does this. I think comics are a great way to bring in and have a conversation about real world things that happen and still affect us to this day. Every time a new issue comes out, I'm like, this is my new favorite. The Doctor Doom issue is still my favorite, but I love every single one so far. For instance, with Captain America, we do get this, oh, I'm a man out of time story, but it's not just that. What he believed America to be is not America. It's taken over by capitalism. The American dream that he thought was real maybe never existed, but is definitely dead now. There's this idea of freedom that isn't actually achieved, it's all fake. It's paper mache, it's a blindfold over our eyes, and Captain America is terrified, frustrated, and confused by it all. Also, in this universe, America doesn't exist anymore. He's literally wearing the sign of a dead dream. Not only is the America that he dreamed to be real was probably never real, but also there's no bones left to make new meat out of. It's all gone, picked away by scavenging capitalism. It's fucking sick. Every issue is a highlight of a real world struggle or real world feeling. Hawkeye is fighting against big oil. She-Hulk and her people were basically tested on by America after World War II during the hydrogen bomb testings. And Dennis Camp did so much research to really educate you in a way that you're not expecting to do going into this superhero story. And it's exactly what I think comics should be. There's always this argument of whether or not comics should or shouldn't be political. Comics have always been political, dead stop. I guess depending on your opinion of what political means in the comic anyway. But even from inception, Superman was invented as a working class hero. Captain America was invented as literal American propaganda. None of this is new. It's just that politics are changing and people are acting like it's now scary. Everyone's quote-unquote favorite Batman story, The Dark Knight Returns, is a political comic. So is Watchmen. They're all political and they're all better for them. We shouldn't have to shy away from talking about hard things. And comics are a great outlet to do that, and Ultimates proves that with some very fun and also scary stories. This book really made me understand the world that they live in better, and also reflected my own world and made me feel hopeful and inspired. In the Free Comic Book Day issue, Captain America throws a Molotov to ignite his friend and basically ignites the flame of rebellion. And I stood up. I stood up in my seat. I stood up in my seat like I was in that Robin Williams movie. Like, oh Captain, oh Captain. Like, I was so proud of a guy that doesn't exist. Not of America, not of what he thinks he represents, but of the spirit of freedom. I don't know what else to say. I do have some criticisms with the book though. It's not a perfect book. I think the art is kind of flaky. I don't want to be mean, but Juan Frigeri's art isn't really that kinetic. It's not kinetic, and it also doesn't do posing very well. It's very kind of static and safe. And then every once in a while there's this big scene of like energy or action. You're like, whoa, there's something there. Why does he do that all the time? And I feel like he doesn't know how to do talking heads very well that feels engaging or entertaining. But I'm not saying the art is bad, it just doesn't really fit for what I'm expecting for this series. I kind of wish they went with a heavy hitter, or that Juan Frigeri had some more direction in elevating in some type of way. It just feels like serviceable for the story. I also know a lot of people don't like the pacing in this story. A lot of people don't like the snapshots and wish there was more team energy and team moments. I kind of don't disagree with that. For me, it's not necessary. Again, I like seeing these characters get focused stories so we can learn who they are. But now that we're entering the second volume, I kind of agree with them. It would be nice to see more team effort things. We saw the one team effort towards the end of the first volume, and didn't go great. So it'd be nice to see them come together truly after this terrible loss. But I also still want them to do these isolated stories. But someone called this misery porn, and I gotta say, dude, what are you talking about? I've never felt more inspired from a comic. There's a general air of hope around this grim misery that I think feels really reflective of how I want to feel in our world. It's people fighting the good fight, and that makes me want to fight the good fight, and I hope you guys are also feeling that energy and feeling like you could stand up and do something, and that you want to do something. Alright, here we are. Last but not least, Ultimate Spider-Man. Everyone's favorite, Jonathan Hickman, Marco Checchetto, the Dream Team, Dream House premiere book. Each issue goes to second printing. It kicked off the Ultimate Universe. Everyone loves it. Critically acclaimed. Super hyped. Is it good? Yeah, I'm in the minority here, and I don't know how to talk about this. Because folks, I'm conflicted. I loved the original Ultimate Universe. With all its flaws, problematic material, I still loved it. I still loved the ideas and the feelings, and even through my criticism, and even when I didn't like a book, I was still excited to get to the next one. Ultimate Spider-Man was the most hyped, and I was the leading charge of being like, guys, trust the process, trust the process. And then Jonathan Hickman got announced, and I was like, see? Then Marco Checchetto got announced, I said, see? Then The Marriage came back, and I said, see? And then the first issue came out, and I was like, hell yeah! And then the second issue came out, and I was like, okay. And the third issue came out, I was like, okay. And the fourth issue came out, and I just went downhill from there. This is not the general consensus, and I want to talk more about why people like it before I go into the reasons I like it and don't like it. The first big thing is that it's Jonathan Hickman and Marco Checchetto. These are two premier creators, and they're fantastic. Jonathan Hickman is one of the best writers of this generation. I love his work. I think East of West is one of the best indie comics of all time, and still his best work. I have nothing but respect for him. Marco Checchetto, his art never fails. It always delivers. It's very posy, but it still feels like action's happening. And it still conveys a lot of complex emotions in faces, in action, in everything. It's a dream team. The next big thing that got a lot of people into it, and is also a reason why a lot of people stay around, is because it's not 616 Spider-Man. 616 Spider-Man is in a weird place where it's selling great still. Spider-Man will never sell badly, but fans are conflicted or crossed on what they want from the book. A lot of fans online, for instance, are really adamant that they want the marriage back, but at the same time, a lot of people don't care about the marriage or don't want it back. Peter Parker's in this weird predicament in 616 where people want to relate to him, and Marvel doesn't know, in my opinion, how to do that well. They think sticking him in this time loop where he's perpetually only in his late 20s instead of aging with the rest of the world keeps him relatable, but in my opinion, I don't agree. One, I don't think it's relatable to be stuck in a loop where you're constantly just a failure. I think Spider-Man failing is a part of his character and is what makes him relatable, but at some point it becomes hard to just like even look at. Like in this latest run, there's a scene where he gets a date with Black Kate and he's like, ooh, and I was like, dude, you should be 40 right now. What are you doing? But yeah, I get giggly over dates too and everything, but this is someone you've dated multiple times before. So I have no idea why right now you're like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. My heart's beating. I'm having Yo, get up, dude. Like, you're not embarrassed? Like, I'm embarrassed for you. I'm embarrassed for myself for reading this shit. And one of the most conflicting things is that people don't know what to do about the marriage. Marvel thinks the marriage makes Peter feel old and it's unrelatable. I don't understand that at all. First and foremost, I relate to a lot of characters not because of what they're going through specifically, but because of the character they are. Like, I'm not rich, I don't have an iron suit, but Iron Man is relatable because of his struggles. He struggles with addiction, he struggles with public image, he struggles with himself and his identity. That's relatable. But for some reason, Marvel doesn't think that way for Spider-Man. They think, oh, he has to stay one specific way. And a lot of young readers are reading him, and a lot of young readers aren't in relationships, so he should always be struggling with a relationship. He should always never be in a marriage, stuff like that. That's like if your best friend got married and then all of a sudden you're like, we can't relate anymore. I don't know what you're going through at all, so I'm out. What are you talking about? We like our friend because of who he is, because of his struggles, because he trusts us, because we get to talk to him and we see ourselves in them, or we just want to help because they helped us in the past or something like that. That's how I feel about Spider-Man. Spider-Man helped me through a lot of dark times. I've always felt relatable to him, and I always liked him. He was always someone I always looked up to as a character and an idea. Not anymore. So a lot of people are coming from 616 and seeing that things that they were looking for, like the marriage and Peter going through more adult situations, is happening. I asked online what people were thinking about the Ultimate Universe so far before this video came out, and a few people mentioned they thought the pacing was slow and they weren't in love with the story, but they wanted to support it specifically because of the marriage. Now that's a minority of people. I'm not saying this is like why everyone's supporting the book at all. Again, I think a lot of people love this book because of its merits. I think they like it because of the storytelling, it's taking big swings, and it's a new jumping on point. But it can't be denied, in my opinion, that a lot of people are on this book specifically not to spite 616 Spider-Man, but to specifically show Marvel that they want to support the marriage and the marriage can sell and is not a deterrent. Now, with all that out of the way, I want to talk about how I feel about the book. That's right. I'm conflicted and mostly disappointed. This book, like the rest of the universe, is pretty experimental. It's doing the month-by-month thing, and I think the month-by-month basis of it kind of spoils everything about the book. Because by skipping through months, we kind of miss crucial details. Like, we don't get to see a lot of the team-ups, so everything's kind of implied. And this implication, I think, is bothering me specifically more than other people. Because it's a new universe, I don't know these people. Yes, we're coming in with this meta-contextual information of I know who Spider-Man, Green Goblin, Mary Jane, Ben, Parker, Otto Octavius, I know who these characters are supposed to be and who they are. And so that informs who I'm expecting when I go into this book. I think the book uses it too much. There's not a lot of information we get about these characters in these early issues, especially the first volume. There's a lot of expectation of, you know who these guys are, so we'll give you snapshots of it so we can inform that you are right about who you're assuming they are. I've talked to other people about this, they don't care, but for me, I want to learn who these characters are. There's a lot of assumptions and tells, but not a lot of show, and I want that show instead of the tell. I like how my head bobbed back and forth with that. Show, tell. That's professionalism, baby. And the month-by-month fails that show aspect of it. We'll leave an issue with one feeling or one understanding of a theme, and then in the next issue, we don't really discuss it or directly confront it. The second volume I think is better at this, but the first volume is a lot of like snapshot moving forward. And it doesn't feel like a good pace. Again, I think the experimentation is really cool and interesting, but is it working? No. Like, let's take our nerd caps off for a second and really look at this story for what it is without the meta contextual information. If you could tell me anything about MJ's job or why she does it or likes it, I'll give you $1,000. Because I'm lost. Some of these characters are not characters. Recently I've been reading a little bit of Kurt Vonnegut, and in one of his interviews, to paraphrase that, he basically says that a character should always want something in a scene. And I don't think every character is really defined by that. I think most of them are, but when you get to someone like MJ or the kids, are they characters in any of these scenes? Do I know what any of these characters want at any time, or what their relationship really is besides what we're told versus shown? We're shown a little bit of the relationship between Peter and his daughter. Very clearly, she wants to be involved, I guess, in this Spider-Man aspect of it. Who is she as a character outside of just that, oh, I want to design this Spider-Man suit? Or, oh, I want to go web swinging with my dad. I don't know. And it's worse for, I think, MJ, where I can't tell you anything about her character except for what we know from the 616 version. Like in this version, we know she runs her own agency for public relations. What does she want? She wants to help Spider-Man? Okay, and kind of the newspaper? Okay. What else? Who is she? What does she see for her future? What does she see outside of her kids and her husband? I don't know anything. I don't know what she likes for movies or music. That's not important, obviously, but there's no little detail that we know for who she is as a person outside of Spider-Man. Every issue we see her in, it's all in relation to what's happening with other people. And I think that kind of sucks. Like J. Jonah Jameson and Uncle Ben get to start their own newspaper that just so happens to cross over to Spider-Man's story. Harry Osborn also has a story that just so happens to cross into Spider-Man's story. He got this suit and tech handed down to him and wants to take down the powers that be, and that just so happens to put him in the path of Spider-Man. MJ has a business that we don't know anything about. We never see her run it. We're just told she's good at it and she owns it. Like there's a scene where MJ finally finds out that Peter Parker's big secret after 6 months of not telling her is that he is Spider-Man. He's going around putting himself in danger. And she finds out not because Peter says, now is a good time to tell you. She finds out by accident because he comes home beat to hell and his daughter tells her by accident because she's too excited or scared for her dad. And after all of that, all MJ has to really say is, I hope you're doing okay. She's like a little annoyed and a little scared, but it's not put forward in dialogue very much at all. It's very pushed past as her going, I'm scared, but I trust you. Let's have sex. And you're like, whoa, that's it? It's been 6 issues. He lied to you for 6 months, or at least omitted the truth. He's hiding that he's a superhero. what? I think that's kind of crazy. I don't care how in love I am with my partner. If they were hiding that they were a superhero, I could be understanding. I can understand it's hard to talk about and that you want to keep a secret and that you don't know what you're doing yet or if it's going to be really a long-term thing. But you're out there risking your life while we have kids for 6 months. That's a long time. And just brush it off as like, I'm scared and a little annoyed, but also I trust you. I don't know if that's really interesting to me. I don't need them to have a shouting match. I don't want them to have like a divorce or like a falling out like that. But you can have a healthy conversation that's still filled with upset and frustration. And I don't know why that's not happening. 12 issues in, that never happens. MJ brings up that she's scared about the Spider-Man thing only twice in these 12 months. And it's all 6 months apart. And the second time I'm like, oh, finally we're gonna have an actual conversation. But the conversation is again just, I'm really scared and I don't know about this, but I trust you, let's have sex. What? And in writing, dialogue doesn't need to feel real, but it needs to feel real to the characters. And this is how the characters are written. I don't like that. I don't know, it just feels like we're doing the marriage just to do the marriage instead of actually giving some stakes to having a marriage in a superhero lifestyle. And it's hard to say why this isn't working. I think a lot of these pieces can work together and do work together really well, but it doesn't glue together because there is that missing character interaction aspect of it. And I think partly it has to do with I just personally don't like how Hickman does dialogue sometimes. Hickman's a very big thinker and a big world building thinker, and sometimes it means his characters get a little dialed back. Like for me, J. Jonah Jameson and Uncle Ben sound exactly the same. If you read their dialogue to me, I wouldn't know the difference between them at all. The same with Harry Osborn, Gwen Stacy, and a little bit of Otto Octavius. They all sound like the same to me. MJ and the kids don't really have any character for me to speak of besides generic like, I'm a child and I support my husband. And it'd be nice if that dialogue felt a little bit more characterized. And overall, things are moving slow but too fast. It's a weird paradox. I love a slow burn. Don't let anyone try to tell you differently. A lot of people, when I said I didn't really like the pacing of this book, were like, well, slow burns aren't for everyone. Slow burns are for me specifically. One of my favorite movies is No Country for Old Men. I love a slow burn. Don't get me twisted. But when you do a slow burn, you still have to put action into what's going on. That's not to say fight scenes. I don't need more fight scenes. I kind of like how there's not a lot of fighting going on in this comic. There has to be a real motivation besides a long-term arc. It doesn't always feel like each issue is really interested in like moving that forward. Like a lot of the first volume is just set up of, oh yeah, J. Jonah Jameson and Parker are starting a newspaper. Okay. It's not until the second volume where we're like, oh, this is what the newspaper is really about and why they're doing this. And that's when it gets really interesting. A lot of the stuff I love about this series is in the second volume. There's more focus on Harry Osborn, who I think is the most interesting character of the bunch. I really like his dynamic. I like his writing specifically. And I like the little plot elements we're getting of how he feels about himself through his dialogue with his AI robot assistant head thing. That's the voice of his dad. I also think we start to see a little bit of Peter Parker's personality a little bit more and how it relates to Spider-Man. Again, it helps a lot with his AI voice a little bit, but I think the dialogue's a little bit cheesier on the nose. But there's one point where the dialogue's literally just like, boy, I love my kids. And I'm like, really? I don't know that. And it sounds like I hate this book, but I don't. I really like this book, but I'm just conflicted and I'm disappointed a little bit. I want to love this book, that's the problem. I think there's a lot of great stuff in this book that's just brought down by a few big issues for me. The pacing, the dialogue, and the lack of characterization in motivation at the very least of some of these characters. Specifically the characters I was excited for. I was really excited for Peter. I was really excited for MJ. And both of them are kind of lacking right now. This is awkward. It's December 18th right now, and I'm doing editing, like last bit right before the video drops, and Ultimate Spider-Man number 12 came out, and I gave it a little read real quick to make sure that there wasn't anything I needed to add for the video, and I'm glad I read it because a lot of stuff happens in this issue that I liked a lot. For the most part, I really like the dialogue in this issue. I think it's a big growth, and it's a lot of the moments I was looking for Mary Jane, where we're getting to actually see her character. We get a lot more character work with all these characters. We get to actually see them in action, interacting and bouncing off each other. I really enjoyed all the different dynamics grouped up together and the new characters introduced that just brought more spice to the flavor. And Mary Jane actually felt like a solid, real character in this, and I was so excited to learn more about her past. I thought the dialogue was really bouncy and fun. I really liked Mary Jane's characterization, and we get to see that come out with who she interacts with and how she interacts with them differently. We also got to see a little bit more of the son and how he interacts with the rest of the family. I'm sorry, but for the life of me, I cannot remember these kids' names, so they're going to be daughter and son, and I'm sorry about that. But expanding more on the conversation he was having with J. Jonah Jameson in the last issue, and quote-unquote last month, it helped the character feel more fleshed out, and it also helped J. J. Jonah Jameson's character. I feel this book really excelled this issue because the characters got to interact and not be worried about the plot. It's weird because every issue doesn't feel like it's about the plot or moving forward, but now that we actually get to see an actual moment of, hey, we're taking a chill pill this issue, the characters are actually like being characters. And again, going back to Mary Jane, I think this is her best issue in terms of writing. There's no Spider-Man to talk about, no Peter Parker to talk about. It's just her and her problems and her relationships. And I think that's great. I think I finally get an idea of who this character is, her relationship with her sister and her mom and how complex it is. And even in the small things like her refusing help, I think we got to see a little bit more of who she is as a character. So I really liked issue 12. I don't think this just like is a blanket like forgiveness statement for me. I think all the problems from the first 2 volumes are still very prevalent up to this point. But in just one issue, I feel like a lot of the issues I had with this series so far has been addressed. I think this issue is a big turning point for that, and now I feel more comfortable if going forward we saw less moments of them. There's more implication I could take away because I know now really who these characters are based on interactions I'm getting introduced to. So I just wanted to hop back in and just like be fair about my criticisms because this does change and it is the full year now, and so I think that's a fair way to end that. Anyway, happy holidays and back to the video. But I really love the flip on responsibility for Ultimate Spider-Man versus 616 Spider-Man. 616 Spider-Man did not choose to get bit by a spider. It was thrusted upon him, and then he had to learn that with his power must come a great responsibility. We all could say it together. But this Spider-Man doesn't get that. He has a choice. He gets to choose if he wants to be Spider-Man. And he looks at it and says, yes, I want this. Something in my life doesn't feel right. Something is missing. I'm not the man I'm supposed to be, and I will take this responsibility. Now, he doesn't clearly know what responsibility means yet, even a year in. But that's interesting. That's the most interesting aspect, and it's not explored pretty much at all in the first like 8 issues. But now that it's starting to get explored, I'm really excited for the future of the book. I just feel like the lead up didn't need to take this long. I don't think we needed 12 issues to get to Peter having a conundrum about what responsibility means to him. And I'm not going to sit here and tell Jonathan Hickman how to write his book, but it just did not work for me. And I felt like we could have been a little bit more active in these 12 issues of showing who these characters are instead of implying and telling us. So overall, I'm conflicted. I think the Ultimate Universe is very fun and all the books are good, but I don't know if it's for me. I think like Ultimates is the only book that I read monthly and I'm excited to read. All of the other ones got regulated to trade waiting and I enjoyed reading them, but I didn't feel like I really missed out by waiting and getting some of the aspects spoiled for me in these stories. I think the best thing about the Ultimate Universe is the success of the Ultimate Universe. I think it's great that we're trying new stories and new experimentation with storytelling. The month-to-month thing isn't working for me, but it's a fun thing to try. And that's all I really want from comics. I want comics to try to be fresh. There's a lot of things in comics we can do that other mediums can't do. Movies can't do month to month. They just cannot because it wouldn't make sense. But to follow a story in real time as you go month to month, as you change over a year yourself and you have your own mini arcs, I think that's a really fresh idea that could work with a little tweaking maybe. And the other aspect is I'm so happy to see comics winning. It's always great when a comic is successful, so long as it's not like problematic or something. And Ultimate Universe isn't problematic. It's an attempt at being earth-shattering, at being contentious, at being conversational. It wants new and old fans to hop in and feel something fresh, and it feels so fresh, and I love that. So despite all my criticisms, despite all my flaws, I am so glad the Ultimate Universe is doing exactly what it's doing, because that's what we need. We need big swings, we need failures, we need successes, because that's how we all grow. Not just comics, but you and me as well. So that's all I have to say about the Ultimate Universe at this time. I'm excited to see what Ultimate Wolverine's like and what other new books are coming up, and how the world fleshes out over time. Will I be following it monthly? Not so much, maybe 1 or 2 of the comics out of the 5 now that we have, but I highly recommend that you try it out. Just because something's not for me doesn't mean it's not for you. And again, clearly other people love these books. Even if I drop all these books, thousands and thousands of people love them for a reason. So you should come in and figure out your own reason for why you do or don't like it. And when you figure that out, let me know in the comments. Do you agree with me about the characterization of MJ? Do you disagree with me about something else? This is a place for discussion. So if you disagree with me about what I said about Ultimate Spider-Man or what I said about Ultimates, I'd love to hear about your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for joining me for my video. Hope to see you next month, and please like and subscribe. Please.